Hey class, in this video I'm going to go over adding some filters and adjustments to our composite image in Photoshop. So this is a way that we can kind of add effects to the image to make it look more interesting or more realistic, or there's different directions that we can take it in. So we're just going to get right into it. I'm going to go back over to Photoshop, kind of start where we left off in the last video. So what I'm going to do is first, just kind of make some adjustments to the lighting, just to kind of show how we might make some changes to make it look more realistic. And then after that, what we'll do is do some filters to make it look more stylized. So when we're editing a photo, sometimes we want realism, sometimes we want it to be more stylized. It kind of depends on the context. So we'll kind of talk about different approaches to both of those things. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on my lizard here. And the lizard looks good, but the lighting is not correct for this scene. You can see that, the highlights of the lighting are mostly coming from sort of this direction, versus in the main scene, the lighting is coming straight down from, the sun. So the lighting is a little bit different. It's not so bad, but if we make some small adjustments to the lizard, we can make it not stand out as much. We can't like perfectly recreate the lighting of this scene, but we can do a couple things to make it look a little better. So one way of adding adjustments or filters is directly onto a layer. So it only affects that layer. We'll go over that now, and later we'll talk about adding adjustments to the whole composition. So if I want to make an adjustment to this layer, I can go to image and then go to adjustments. And there's a bunch of different options here. These all do different things, different kind of like cool mathy things that change the overall look of the pixels. A lot of them get pretty complex. Some of them are, simpler than others. I'm going to start with a very simple levels adjustment, and we'll see how that looks. I might use a curves adjustment if I can't get what I want with the levels adjustment. What the levels adjustment does is it just kind of adjusts the overall levels of our color channels. So we have red, green, and blue color channels. If we change the amount of color in those channels, we'll get a different overall look. One thing that happens when we add adjustment is you can see on the layer there's this little drop down here. Actually, I can't click on it because I'm in this levels section, but let's get out of here. Let's add that back. Let's add our levels. If I do an adjustment here, it's going to add this to this kind of drop down here. And so we can turn it on and off. We don't see anything yet. And then I can double click this to make some changes. So let's just try to match the color of the lizard to the scene a little bit. So I'm going to take out just a lot of the brighter colors in general. So I'll kind of shift this up a little bit and then shift this down a little bit. That's a little too dramatic. So let's just take the output overall levels down a little bit. I don't want to go too far because it starts to look a little more obvious that you're kind of playing with it. But I'm just going to take the overall down a little bit. And then I can go into specific channels. So I think there's like a little too much yellow in the lizard. So I can take out a little bit of red and green. So if I go in here and I take out a little bit of red, it gets a little bit more green. But if I take out a little bit of green, now it's just a little less yellow. And that actually makes some of the kind of like bluer parts of the lizard pop out a little bit more. And that kind of matches the lighting of our scene a little bit more. You can see there's a lot of blue. There's a lot of kind of like bright whites in this scene. And so this is a little too dark right now, but it does look more like it's part of the same scene. I'm going to make it a little less dark by just moving this mid down a little bit. And let's actually move the output up a little bit. Okay, so you get the idea. It's not perfect, but you could spend a lot of time kind of playing around with those values until you get something that matches a little bit. Another thing that I can do here, our lizard doesn't have a shadow, so that's one very obvious thing that kind of makes it stand out in the scene. So I can actually add some effects in here to help with that. So I can access the effects down here as well. You can see there's multiple ways to get to all of these things. For some reason, I always go down here for the effects, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a drop shadow effect. And so this will also show up in this drop down here, so you can turn these on and off to see how they look. So we're going to do a little drop shadow. We can set the angle here, and so you can see we just want to match the angle of the shadow on the pigeon. I'm actually going to spread it out a little bit more just to make it more obvious where this is going. So there's our shadow, and we want it to be going down like that and right there. I think that's pretty good. We can adjust that if we need to. And then let's turn the opacity back down and the distance back down. So we just want a little shadow in there, and it's a little bit too far away. Let's bring that back. Let's bring the distance back a little bit more. Okay, so you can compare that to the pigeon shadow. It's not perfect. It's pretty close. But again, if you want to, I can turn this on and off to see the difference, and it looks pretty good. Of course, I wouldn't want shadow where the head is. I could put a mask on here, so maybe I would just draw a little selection. Let's just draw a little box right here. Doesn't have to be perfectly accurate. And I'm just gonna go to select and inverse, and then I'll mask this drop shadow effect. Okay. Oh, I guess maybe I can't do that. Let's ignore that for now, but that's something that we might want to do as well. Anyway, we've got a little shadow here. We can turn off the levels and see the difference. So see, when I turn the levels off, the lizard is just so much brighter than the rest of the scene. It really stands out. With my adjustment, it looks a lot more like it's naturally part of the scene. Okay, so those are a few kind of realism-based adjustments to make the lizard look like it's more a natural part of this scene. Now let's go for some stylistic adjustments. So there's a lot of other things you could do to kind of enhance the look of the scene if you wanted to. And what we can look at now is applying filters that apply to everything in the scene, not just one layer. So we can do this by adding an adjustment layer. So this is a layer that just applies an adjustment to anything below it. So if I go up to layer and new adjustment layer, there's a few different options here. You can see also the same options under this adjustments panel on the side as well. So there's always like a lot of different ways to add stuff. So let's add in a layer. I want to do something very stylized here. So I'm going to do a gradient map. This is a fun way to just change the entire color palette. So let's hit OK here. And so this shows us our gradient map. And if we drop down on this gradient, you can see there's some defaults here. So we could choose like kind of a cool like purple look. And what this does is it takes this gradient map and it maps it onto the colors in the scene. So anything that's really bright will get mapped to the right side of the gradient. Anything that's really dark will get mapped to the left side of the gradient. So we can get these kind of different effects. There's a lot of detail in this scene, and so it makes it, in some cases, kind of hard to actually see, but we can make some adjustments to make it look a little better. Let's find a good baseline. Ooh, that's kind of nice. Oh, that's good. Okay, let's find a good baseline to start with, and then we can make some changes. So if I double click on this gradient, it'll bring up my gradient editor, and I can adjust these colors. So I can click on this color, I can make this a little more orange, that might look nice. And then I can also adjust, how close each color is in terms of the overall gradient. And so if I move this closer to orange, I just get these little orange highlights. That's kind of nice. If I move it closer to blue, it's kind of the opposite. And then I can also add colors in here. So if I click on here, how do I add? Oh, I can move these colors as well. How do I add? I thought, oh, no, I don't want to do that. Give me a second. Okay, so just to add, you just have to get this little pointer guy. So you don't want to use the eyedropper, you want to use this little pointer. Okay, so I can add another color in here. And then the more like kind of different this color is, the more you're going to see like lots of edges in different places. If it's closer to some of the colors we already have, you're going to see less kind of harsh edges. So if I do like kind of like a green or blue, you're going to see stuff start to pop out more. Let's do kind of a darker blue into purple. Okay, and let's shift the oranges so they're more like little highlights. And let's shift this guy this way. Okay, so that's kind of cool. We're starting to lose a lot of the detail. So this color is kind of like taking over a lot of the mid-range of our colors. So I added a color by accident. Let's shift things closer to here so that we get some of those details back. And then let's shift this guy up here. Okay, so, you know, I could play around with this a lot. This is kind of like a basic approach. It's not perfect, but it's kind of interesting. And then I can kind of go from there. So we've got our stylization. That's our gradient map. There's also like more data that I can add into the scene. So something that I like to do a lot with a photo or just graphics in general is add noise. Noise is a good way to add texture, and it kind of gives it the sense of like an analog image. So something from like an old camera or old film. So to do that, what I want to do is add a new blank layer. So I'm just going to add a completely new blank layer. And then I need to add something in there to add the noise to. You could add just a color, but you know, we could see using the gradient that it's a really nice thing to use. So over here in our toolbar, we have a gradient. We can just add in a gradient for the whole image. And then what we can do is we can blend this into the rest of the image. So we can do like maybe a overlay or a soft light. And then we can kind of adjust the image using this little gradient, something like that. And then we can add noise into that gradient. So I'm going to click on this gradient. I'm going to go to filter and go to noise and add noise. And it's going to make me either make this a smart object or rasterize it. So I'll lose a little bit of the ability to edit, but that's okay. So now we can add our noise. If we add a lot of noise, you're going to see this like really grainy effect. That might be kind of cool. You might like that. If you just add a little bit of noise, it's a little bit more of a subtle, just kind of film grain look. You can also turn off the color in the noise if you don't want to change the color palette. But that's kind of looking pretty cool. I kind of like that. So I'm going to hit OK here. And so now we have a gradient, but we have a noise or filter on that gradient. So we can see, you know, how those look with that or without that. So that's another type of adjustment that you can make, is actually adding more detail into the image. You can see there's tons of other adjustments. There's also tons of like filters you can do. You can stylize, you can add all sorts of crazy stuff in here. So I recommend playing around with this stuff more. I'm going to stop here just because I've covered some of the basics that I want to cover, and we'll go over submitting this part of the assignment. I didn't really talk that much about blending, but with this gradient, if I don't have a blend mode on here, if I just have normal, it doesn't mix with the rest of the scene. So that's another case where blend modes are really useful. If I do an overlay or soft light, something like that, it's going to give me a nice blend with this gradient and the rest of the image. So I'm going to save this, and we're going to export and add it to our OpenLab page. So make sure you save your PSD. Remember, you have to submit the PSD separately, so that'll let me see the adjustments you made, the images you used, and see all of your work. So that's important to submit. For the blog post, if you submit that, I can review it and basically give you feedback on whether it looks good or not. And so that way, for the project, you'll be ready to go. So you won't be missing anything when we get to the main image project. Okay, so let's export a couple of versions of this image and see how they compare. So I'm going to go to File and Export as. And this time, what we're going to see is something very different from our first abstract composition, because we just have so much color data in here. So look at our JPEG. Our JPEG is 1 megabyte. Remember, our abstract image was like 4K or something like that. So this is like basically 1,000 times larger. We might not need all of that data, so let's zoom in a little bit and let's go to 2 up and let's compare. So just comparing JPEG to JPEG. So this is a high quality JPEG, it's 1 megabyte. If we move the quality down here all the way, you can see it gets really blurry. So we don't want something that looks like that. That's pretty gross looking, but we don't need something that's all the way high quality. So what we want is something in the middle. So you can see this really low quality image is 43K. That's a lot smaller. That's a lot better for posting on the internet. This one is 1 megabyte. It's not crazy, but it's bigger than it really needs to be. So let's see if we can get to a point where the quality is decent, but the image size is a little smaller. So I guess we can't really, even if we go down to 4, you can already start to see the blurriness. So I think we need to go 5, but quality 5 is still is like half of the original image. And I don't think most people would notice the difference between these two images. So I'm going to go with that. I'm going to export the 500K 5 quality. So I'll save this as composite.jpg. And now let's save a PNG for comparison. So I'll go to export, export as, and this time let's switch over to PNG. So there's no quality meter on the PNG. It just is, what it is. So it's going to be high quality, but it's also very large. This one is 2.3 megabytes. So this is the opposite of our abstract image because there's so much more color data in here. The PNG is not efficient for saving this image, whereas the JPEG is very efficient for saving this image. So we can export this, but we're not going to publish it on the blog. So I'll save this. Okay, so let's go look over at our files. Okay, so we have our composite.psd here. We have our composite.jpg. Looks pretty good. It's 500 kilobytes. That's not so bad. And then composite.png also looks good, but it's 2.5 megabytes. So it's 5 times larger than our JPEG. So let's post our JPEG on the OpenLab. So I'm going to go back over to Google Chrome, and I'll go to our OpenLab page. And you have to be logged in, obviously, to do this. I won't go over that again, but if you want to review that, go to the OpenLab video from last week. So I'm going to create a new post. And let's add a title, composite image draft. So this is our first draft of this project. So we're going to do some more changes next week, and then we'll submit it again. Let's go ahead and set the category. So this is still our image project, and this is our weekly blog post. And then let's upload our image. So last time when I did this, I hit the plus button and added the image that way. Let's look at another way we can do this. We can just drag and drop. So if I open up the Finder window to where I can see the image, I can drag this image. And if I get this little blue bar, that means it's going to upload that image to WordPress. So that looks pretty good. Let's add a description. So let's say I added a lizard into this photo of New York so he could hang out with his pigeon buddy. So just describe the concept behind it, anything else that you think might be interesting about the process or your ideas. But that's just the basic idea. So once we're done with that, we're going to click publish. And then you can view the post and you can copy the post URL. So if I click copy and click view post, we're going to see what that post looked like. And that looks pretty good. And then finally, the last step, as always, is to go back to Brightspace and go to the assignments. And let me switch to learner view. Let's do that again. So composite image is blog post 2. You're going to double check the rubric, make sure that you've got everything that you need, and then add your PSD file. So let's go find our PSD file. So this is going to be composite.psd. And click add. And then just paste in a link to the OpenLab. You don't need to add any text or images here. Just paste in that link and click submit. So that's it for this week. Hopefully, this is a fun process to kind of add some cool filters and make your image look cool. If you have any questions, of course, let me know. We can go over them in office hours. And I'll see you guys in the next video.